Okay, thank you for that warm welcome. It's the first time I'm speaking into such a silent microphone, so it's a bit of a weird situation for me. I'm still getting used to it. We're very happy that you're all here and that we can give some insights into our study that we conducted last year. This is basically, has already been said, so we are from Vienna and Barcelona, and we're journalism researchers, but we try to keep this talk as unacademic as possible. So some context, we came last year to Republica to study what role digital space means and plays for communities in digital societies. And we were primarily interested in understanding how hybrid digital communities that not only attend events but also talk about these events and write about these events, how they make sense of their epistemic authority. And we talked with very different journalists and journalism-like producers that we have many here, like bloggers, old-school bloggers, but also other content creators to understand this. We chose two different communities, and one of them was Republica, because I remembered how throughout history of Republica there was always a very vibrant digital discussion going on beforehand, during Republica, but also afterwards. So we thought it's the perfect case for our study. And then last year, we tried to find interview partners beforehand already, and we're looking on social media, and there was not really any communication anymore. So we were like, crap, is Republica not an interest-based, effective online community anymore? But when we then came here on site, we saw that it's actually a really close-knit network community with an open culture, which allowed us to conduct the study.
All right, so I'll start talking a little bit about the study, because this was the community that we studied. It's only fair that we fill the community back in with our results. We conducted 27 interviews and observations of the community. These were conducted in two different events, like Phoebe mentioned. One was the Eurovision Song Contest, and the other one was Republica. And as you can see here, the people we talked to were very diverse. And originally with this study, we had the goal of understanding how all these diverse journalistic actors actually connected and related and talked about their communities. So a little bit about these findings is that we talked about their membership, or how they perceive their membership in the community. And these were, we talked to bloggers that had been attending Republica since the very foundation, so they considered themselves as members, they identified as members. Then we also talked with mass media journalists who saw themselves more as, participants with a vested interest in the community. And then a lot of other respondents questioned this journalists' authenticity. They called their coverage pretty on the surface, so not really genuine or not really capturing the feeling of the community. Republica, and here you're going to hear and feel this sense of affective community, was described by the attendees as a class reunion, a homecoming, an emotional home. And so it was really this event where all these connections that had been formed online really turned into real-world enduring connections, right? So newer attendees view this as a very aspirational element of participating in Republica. But as we were talking to people, this kept coming up, right? And it really spoke to our experience preparing for the study. And it's that there was this sense that with Elon Musk having purchased Twitter, the community, the digital structure that was supporting this very vibrant community was lost. So here you can see some quotes from the attendees. I will touch on the main points because I think it's a bit small. But we heard that they had lost Twitter, that this was the tool that they used to get in touch with these really important connections, that there was just not one space anymore, that there were alternative options, but it wasn't the same. So it was really hard to replicate what they already had on Twitter. Whoops. Spoiler alert. So we heard a lot about how there was a loss of connections, a loss even of security. So this participant in particular was talking about how she had to leave a lot of people behind. Not because she wanted to, but it was a choice that she had made because she felt that the values that were around Twitter weren't her values anymore. So she had decided to step away, and she was feeling that there was no real option to go to because it wasn't the same. So she had lost her network, she felt a bit lost, and she felt like people were now scattered and that they weren't together in this hometown that Twitter used to be. So this reminded me of some conversations that I had for a previous study with Trump supporters that in 2021 had been deplatformed. Now, I know it's not the same community, the values are not the same, but you can tell in this quote that the feelings of loss and mourning after losing one's community were very similar, were even worded very similarly, right? So here, Savannah, which is one of the participants I interviewed, a pseudonym, was saying that it was very hard to replace what she had on Twitter, that she was so close with her social connections that she felt like she had a right to have a home, but that was taken from her. And that it was very hard because she felt very lost, and wherever she went, even Parler, it just didn't have the same feel as Twitter.
Yeah, so, and this serendipitous finding prompted us to ask what does actually happen when a digital community loses its home. So it was not the the original research question that we had, but from these findings that we had in our data, we were like, so what do we know? What do we already know from research? And a lot of research is around de-Plattforming and platform migration. And so we see that there are different push and pull factors that platforms exert on users that can influence de-Plattforming or platform migration. So we know from research that there are push factors, either voluntary, like with the Twitter exodus, that users are disenchanted, that the values are just not represented anymore, but also involuntary, like platform bans, as Clara just exemplified with her research participant. But there are also pull factors that can affect platform migration and de-Plattforming. So, for example, that another platform is more attractive or provides something that an old platform lost. So here, research often points to the case of the Tumblr migration, where after, in 2018, I think, Tumblr was more strict on adult content. A lot of users migrated to other platforms where they were able to continue that kind of use. And there are also cultural, economic, and also social factors shaping platform migration. One very old example is the white flight from Facebook to Facebook, where people migrated from MySpace because it became more and more diverse, more socioeconomic poorer people, but also more black and brown people were coming onto MySpace, and Facebook was associated more with this white college elite, and then white youth went to Facebook back in the aughts. But in general, what we find in research is that this loss of community, this mourning, this feeling of disempowerment is similar across different communities that lose their social media platforms where they can meet. This also brings about perceptions of insecurity, which can even lead to self-censoring, where because you fear that you might be banned if you talk about certain practices, you just stop doing so, which also, and that something that Clara will pick up on later, might shape how successful migration to another platform can be affected. And all of this makes it very difficult to replicate a community in a different social media space, and it's hard to coordinate an alternative.
All right, so back to the QAnon case. We engaged with some research that studied this case, and so what they found was that following the forced deplatforming from these users from Twitter, there was an intent to migrate into another platform that was openly more accepting of the kind of hate speech that they were, or disinformation spread that they had been banned for. So these were Parler, Dotwin, Gab. So the QAnon community then tried to migrate into these platforms, but it went from a very concentrated, very highly engaged community on Twitter to a more scattered, multi-platform community. So even though it became a little bit more extreme, because that was the main motivation to move into these platforms, it became less intensely engaged and more scattered, more fragmented. However, research has also identified some community characteristics that can help for a successful migration. This is from the Twitter to Mastodon case. And so the authors found that community structure plays a role. For example, smaller communities can have more focused discussions and active talk about how to coordinate the migration. Also, in a small community, when part of it moves, then the pressure to also move, because a bigger part of your community is already out of that platform, then it becomes more important. Then also actively talking, discussing signals to the community that this is an important decision, and it's a coordinated decision, and it's a decision that has to do with continuing to be a member of the community, so it encourages the action. And then having a strong shared identity where is again about that sense of belonging that might be lost if you don't migrate, but that can be, maintained if you do. And that's also one of the elements of success for the migration into another platform.
There are also factors that affect switching costs from one platform to another, especially when the platform doesn't die organically, right? Some platforms just fade out and you found a good replacement that had attractive pull factors for you, and then it's fine. And maybe some of you paused only their Twitter and didn't delete it. And that's also one of the switching costs, because if you invested a lot of emotional attachment into one platform and in the community that you built there, it also affects your sense of identity, and you don't just want to leave that behind. We also know that there's sometimes also a sense of obligation, right? You don't just want to leave Twitter to the hate speech providers. You want to fight it because it was a platform that that was part of your identity, or maybe still is. And there can also be a reliance on the platform's benefits due to alternatives that are lacking. So if a platform does something really well and you can't just migrate everything to another one, you might be more inclined to stay. And we also know from research that there's a fading effect bias, where over time you forget how bad it actually is, and you're just used, you're habituated, you're returning, especially if you just paused your account and continue. And this is especially pronounced in communities that are quote-unquote professional, like journalists or digital policymakers, activists, academics that used platforms like Twitter, we're still calling it Twitter, as a space to brand your work, to showcase your work, to network, right? So it's not only connected to your personal identity, but also your professional identity, and then it's very difficult to replicate that. So based on all of this research that we looked into, we thought maybe we can provide some ideas. But there are a couple of things we need to bear in mind. Republica is now way bigger than when it started in 2007. And it actually also grew organically with Twitter. So Twitter and Republica emerged around the same time, and it fed into each other really well. And so to replicate such a organic growth of a community online is extremely difficult. And we also spoke with Markus Beckedahl last year for our study, and I think that's very fitting, named Republika also the community of communities. So it's a very big meta community, so to say, that not only has people that want to connect on a personal level, but also has many content creators, journalists, people who also communicate to broader audiences. So this kind of community would need a network that would allow for the spurious direct contact in a non-hierarchical way, but also for a way to for the content creators to share their content. So last year there was a debate of what we could do, and someone suggested to return to good old-fashioned blogs. But in blogs we don't have that interconnected way of discussing content, right? So it's not just broadcasting that Republika as a community would need.
All right, so some ideas on how to move forward. So first of all, based on the studies, the other cases, the other communities that have been migrating into new platforms, the migration of the Republika community will take time. Because it is a community of communities, it may be that some communities will find their own homes. So we saw this live survey right there in one of the hallways, and you can see here that there is just not one platform that the community uses. So it may be that these smaller communities find their homes in one of these. That's okay, because one of the advantages that the Republika community has is that the event keeps happening. And so this is a regular, robust meeting point where we can all get together and these communities can be connected and can be still talking to each other and convene. But it might take some deliberate effort to then keep the event as this connecting hub. Some other things that we've learned from research, this is also a well-positioned community to endure this migration because it's a strong, effective community with strong normative values that are shared by the people who attend the event, with intense engagement both offline and online, with a shared identity. I guess some of you have gone to print your own merchandising, and that's, again, a sign of belonging in this community. And a community that is actively talking about how to coordinate this. This is a good example of this, but in the opening session it was also mentioned. So it has the elements there to succeed in the move towards a new digital home.
And that's it from us, but we're looking forward to questions and discussions afterwards. Thank you.